Another academic year at the University of Arizona has come to an end. On this show, we'll look at some of the biggest developments of the year and what's to come. The U of A today and tomorrow. This is Metro Week. Welcome to Metro Week. I'm Vanessa Barchfield, in for Andrea Kelly. The University of Arizona sits at the heart of Tucson, and not just geographically. The biggest employer in southern Arizona, it's an economic powerhouse. Its sports teams unite people from across the community. Researchers and academics educate our young while producing cutting-edge work, from planetary exploration to our own Earth's changing climate, and everything in between. As higher education evolves, how is the U of A faring? The U of A campus has the feeling of a ghost town this week. Many student union eateries have shut down, nearly all of the dorms have been cleared out, and most importantly, classrooms in the mall are practically empty of the school's more than 43,000 students. The scene was very different a week ago, as students hunkered down for finals and those who were graduating said their goodbyes. About 6,000 students earned degrees from the U of A last week, according to university estimates. That included 4,500 undergrads and 1,500 students who earned graduate and professional degrees. Graduation came a few days after Governor Doug Ducey signed a state budget that increases funding to the state's 3 public universities.
To our graduates, congratulations!
We asked U of A President Ann Weaver Hart for an interview. She declined. We did speak with second-in-command Provost Andrew Comrie. He invited us to his office to chat about the state of the university. We began by talking about the state budget, which ups funding to the universities by $32 million and includes $200 million in deferred payments. We asked Provost Comrie to give his assessment on the overall health of the U of A budget.
The overall state of the budget is good. Anytime we can get an uptick in budget, of course, we're very happy. We, of course, had requests in for more, but we understand the realities of the budget. So the portion that the University of Arizona got is broken into a few pieces. Most of it is one-time money, as we call it. Some of that would be, there's an $8 million item in there for our veterinary medicine program in Oro Valley to work on that. There's actually about $2.3 million in regular allocation that goes into the university funds overall to basically be applied to all kinds of things we're working on. And then a number of other items in there, including some other things attached to the budget that allow us to do more creative things with our finances, for example, commercial paper.
What are the deferred payments all about?
The deferred payments are related to the way that the state pays our money to us. About 7 or 8 years ago, in the height of the recession, the state deferred a payment, the 4th quarterly payment that they give us, so that essentially missed a payment and then made it up a quarter later. And we've been essentially a sort of a quarter behind ever since. And now that payment is being caught up. So it was always a payment that would come, and it was always just be a little bit late. So that improves the university's actual cash position. We'd always known the money would eventually be there. Now it's really there.
And what will some of the funding priorities for next year be?
So the funding priorities have been very clearly established. We have a great set of shared governance groups on campus, and even the students have weighed in. And there were really 3 or 4 major categories of funding that we wanted to invest in. The single biggest one that everyone agrees is the most important is salaries. So in fact, just today we've released a salary memo, and we intend to put a compensation increase package in place in the fall semester. The details are still to be determined, but we know enough about the budget now that we can commit to that. And then after that, 2 or 3 other areas. One is we want to invest more in what we do in the fundraising arena. We are behind our peers in what we do there. We have a lot of opportunity, and we think there's a lot of folks who really want to invest in the University of Arizona. So we're making an effort there. And then we have a lot of infrastructure needs, not just delayed maintenance, but other kinds of essential infrastructure, including IT. And so that's also a priority.
And of course, state funding to the university is still significantly down versus, say, 10 years ago. how has that affected the university's ability to recruit top faculty?
Well, all universities, U of A included, have really had to retool what their business models look like. And we're no different. So what we've realized is, of course, that while state funding isn't probably in the near future likely to be back where it used to be, we've had to look at all of our sources of revenue and all of our costs. We've trimmed costs all over the place. We do a lot of internal reallocation. And of course, while trying to keep tuition as modest as possible. And as you know, when we've talked about tuition before, although we've had increases, they don't make up for all those losses. And so we've had to work smarter to be as effective as we can with our resources. And that's really the case in what is still a very competitive environment among different universities nationally. We're a top-ranked school. We'd love to stay a top-ranked school and really deliver on the quality of education for our students.
As of today, we have 1 patient that remains in critical condition and 4 that is in fair condition.
Last week, the Arizona Daily Star reported that Banner UMC's trauma chief, Peter Rhee, is leaving Tucson for a job in Atlanta. According to the article, quote, "A merger last year left Phoenix-based nonprofit Banner Health in control of the hospital and added a layer of bureaucracy that slowed progress and shifted priorities away from research," Rhee said, end quote. We asked Provost Comrie for his reaction to that criticism and to Dr. Rhee's departure.
Well, of course, we're disappointed that Dr. Rhee has chosen to leave, but of course we also have faculty who come and go all the time. We're making a lot of hires, some of them senior this year as well. Whenever you have a large change in an organization, there's likely to be shifts and different people are affected in different ways. I don't think that we're any different from that. But I will add that, just recently we have made big investments because of the Banner merger in hiring in areas such as surgery, as well as many other parts of the medical school. So there's plenty of strong hiring going on, but of course, Dr. Rhee is a well-known figure, and while we're sad to lose him, we also wish him the very best.
And last year, the U of A eliminated 320 positions, mostly through just not filling vacancies. There were some layoffs as well. What have some of the consequences of those staff cuts been over the past academic year?
If we have basically fewer staff, particularly support staff, on average than we did before, then what happens is, apart from working smarter and trying not to, just work twice as much and overwork everybody, if we're more efficient in that, which we are, then we don't see too much impact. But at some point, there are things that just don't happen because you don't have the people to do the work. And clearly, in all the support services on campus, we've had to be really careful to try to balance that so as to make minimal impact wherever we can. Those unfilled positions and some layoffs that we had were really quite spread out all across campus. So that different areas could adapt differently. On the other hand, this is something we constantly are doing, right? This is a big place. Those 300-some employees are on the basis of 11,000 full-time employees and another 4,000 part-timers. So there's a lot of ability to locally tune and flex to what we need to do while dealing with those kinds of layoffs as we went at the time. I would say we have done a great job, actually, of making sure that our services aren't too thin. But we do notice it once in a while when we say, gosh, it would be nice to have X or Y service. And, we have the vanilla version because we haven't yet been able to quite deliver at the level we really want to for service internally. To students and to the outside world, though, I think you'll see essentially no change. This is largely internal administrative kind of stuff where everyone's really interacting a little more than they used to.
And do you think you'll be able to fill some of those positions this year, or they're completely off the university?
We took those positions off the university budget. That was almost $30 million gone. We're constantly investing in new positions and others are departing and changing. There was a net reduction of all those positions. And I don't know that we'll be adding lots more. There may be some, but I think it will be minimal. We're of course going to prioritize the investment in salaries that I just mentioned.
Diversity and inclusion were hot-button issues on college campuses across the U.S. this year, including here at the U of A. The university responded by seeking candidates for a chief diversity officer position and creating a diversity task force.
So the university actually has had a chief diversity officer position for many years. And We were in the process of redesigning that position over the course of the last year. In fact, we created a diversity coordinating council, and I asked them to make a recommendation for how to make that office more effective and restructure it. They did that and recommended that structure, and then we went out to go through the hiring process. It was about that time that all the student issues came into the news. So that was in the works for some time. I'm happy to say that I'm hoping to announce who those people are in the coming week or so, just finalizing hiring decisions. And I think they will in fact have some very positive impacts. So what will in fact be the Senior Diversity Officer is the name of the title, and also the Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusive Excellence. That office will provide really the central support for all the offices on campus, whether it's in the colleges, whether it's in administrative units. It has a coordinating role as well as a support role. Because if you're going to have a large institution such as ours really embrace diversity well, it's got to happen everywhere. And that requires a lot of local engagement and not just a single central office. So that office is structured around providing all kinds of support in terms of training and workshops and that sort of thing, special programs for students, for faculty, for staff, so that we can really be as proud as possible of what we do well in diversity here at the University of Arizona.
By the authority vested in me by the Arizona Board of Regents and acting on the recommendation of the faculty,
President Ann Weaver Hart weathered criticism last semester following her decision to take a seat on the board of the DeVry Education Group, a for-profit company that operates private universities around the country, including Carrington College here in Tucson. The move prompted 22 state lawmakers to call for her resignation from the U of A. The head of the Faculty Senate called the issue a distraction. Dr. Hart has said in statements she won't resign. We asked Provost Comrie how the conversation has affected operations at the U of A.
Within the university, it's really not affecting business at all. Presidents, actually other members of this university and certainly members of many other universities will often serve on boards. And it's a piece of their professional life that often informs the work that they can do in their current job. So I think from that point of view, people understand this, and yet there's also an understandable sense that being another educational institution, the perception perhaps is that, well, where does that align? It turns out on a day-to-day basis, that's a very different institution to ours, and it really doesn't impact things on a daily basis at all.
The U of A has, of course, ramped up its online offerings, launching an online bachelor's degree last year. How has the program been going? What was demand like this year?
So 3 years ago, we had 0 online undergraduate programs, and this year we have 28 online degree programs. So we've really ramped up quite fast, and we're growing even more. It's going quite well, and in addition to the undergraduate programs, we also have a whole range of graduate programs, some of which have been in place for some time. So our online efforts have grown fast, and they're a key component of our strategy. We're not going to become a completely online university, but any university these days, like almost any walk of life, has to have an active online component to it. It really is just another way to access educational materials, and depending on who the student is, they can be completely online, or many students even who are here on campus will sometimes take an online course in addition to the face-to-face classes they take. So it's part of an overall strategy that makes the U of A accessible to everybody.
That's stimulus control. We'll talk about that later on.
The U of A has a goal to enroll 65,000 students by 2025, up from about 43,000 this year.
Well, we reached the goal by growing both face-to-face and online. And that goal is actually not based on picking a number. It's based on understanding the number of high school leavers in Arizona that we serve, as well as what the national markets look like. And of course, as you say, it includes both the face-to-face component, which will be the majority, as well as online. To give you some sense, though, that growth rate over the next 10 odd years or so is not too different to the growth rate we've seen in the last 10 years or so. The university has grown a lot. We're now roughly 43,000 students. But the proportion of online within that total will indeed grow.
And in just a few sentences, can you give me your overall assessment for the state of the university today?
The state of the university today is great. We're doing very, very well. It's a good year. When the budget is up, that's always a good year. We're growing. The students are better than ever. Our incoming class next year is looking to be a really big, diverse, and very well academically prepared class again. A little too early to give final details. We'll know more as the summer proceeds. But I'm bullish. Our research outlook is good. We've done very well this year on our research activity. So onward.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Tonight on Arizona Week, more money for Arizona classrooms, the result of Prop 123 passing.
It will bring at least some money into the classrooms, into the schools right away, so that districts can prioritize at this moment, what can I do for the students, what can I do for the employees.
Now, our Journalists Roundtable. Joining me in the studio are Carol Ann Alaimo of the Arizona Daily Star, Dylan Smith of the Tucson Sentinel, and my colleague at Arizona Public Media, Sarah Hammond. Thank you all for being here. Carol Ann, of course, you're the Star's higher education reporter.
Right.
From your perspective, what were some of the biggest stories out of the U of A over the past academic year?
Well, I think we're seeing some of the fallout from the wrongful dismissal of Dr. Rainer Grusner with the departure of Peter Rhee. I don't think that's anything that the UA can paper over in terms of the seriousness of it and in terms of the how that kind of thing spreads in the higher education world. So there's a lot of people in higher ed now and in academic medicine who know what happened here, and it seems reasonable that is not going to have a positive impact on the U of A. Another thing that I think is noteworthy is the public airing of student grievances about discrimination. The provost talked about they've had a chief diversity officer in the past. Every university states a commitment to diversity, but this year we've seen something I think unprecedented where students are talking directly to the faculty, the administration, and saying, this is what's happening to me. I'm being called the N-word when I walk across campus. I'm a transgender student who's being made fun of in class by my professor. And that kind of face-to-face, I think, really has created more of an impetus for change than there has been in the past. Because it's easy when you are a middle-class white person to not think that this is happening until you hear directly from the people that it's happening to. So I thought that was noteworthy. Another thing that I thought was interesting was the granting of tenure to a professor who was found to have plagiarized a student. That was earlier in the year. But I've seen a couple of things that have made me think that it's hard, maybe not just at the U of A, but it's hard to have accountability for wrongdoing by employees. And what am I mean to say? It's a milieu where people are worried about their reputation, and they're worried about the reputation of the university, and there seems to be I guess, kind of a tendency when anything goes wrong like that, staffing-wise, to tamp it down.
Any positive stories out of the U of A?
Yeah, yes, I was going to say, I think they've made some great progress with the starting their online, kind of launching their online. That has been good progress. They have a new dean for Eller, which it was a big, anytime you lose a dean of a premier program, then there's always a worry about who's going to replace them, and I think they've made a good choice there. So, they've had some ups and downs, and I guess that's to be expected. No institution is perfect.
And of course, not to cut you off, but
yeah.
You've of course covered the controversy surrounding Dr. Hart's involvement with the DeVry Education Group quite extensively. What kind of reaction have you gotten from both the community and the campus?
Well, I've been in Tucson since 1999, I've never seen this amount of ill will, for lack of a better phrase, against a sitting university president. So, and it seems to be from across the spectrum, from students, from faculty, from alumni, and I think most importantly from donors. And I know the provost said that there hasn't been much impact on the U of A yet, but I think it's too soon to tell because a lot of the donors that I've heard from have said that they're not giving, that they're closing their wallets. So I think time is going to tell about what the ultimate impact of DeVry is.
Her serving on the board of DeVry isn't just she's not a volunteer board member for a nonprofit. That's a paid position, right?
Right.
And how much is she getting for that?
It's 70,000 in salary and 100,000 in stock, and I think that's been a sore point with people.
That's a pretty good amount of cash for a side gig. I wish I could get that for a side gig.
Right. And I think, maybe some of the ill feeling, now that they're talking about actually giving raises to the worker bees, for lack of a better, I don't mean to, there's a lot of talented people at the U of A who haven't got raises and who haven't been able to progress financially. So, maybe some of that, when I talked to the faculty senate, chair of the faculty, Lynn Nadell, he said, this raise thing might quell a lot of people's.
Will that help with donors, though? It
I
might help
that won't,
within the
but I'm saying
institution.
within the institution it would. It could, he thinks.
I want to move back to a question I posed to Provost Comrie in our interview. He highlighted the fundraising priorities for next year, salaries, as you mentioned, fundraising and infrastructure. In your reporting, do you see any other areas of the university that are really in sort of dire need of additional funding?
Well, I don't cover the entire university. Stephanie Innes covers the medical aspect, and Tom Beal covers science, and of course we have a whole bunch of sports reporters who cover sports. But so I don't feel really qualified to give a wide breadth analysis of that. But I think that they have had projects that they wanted to do, building projects that they wanted to do that have been put on hold. They've had maintenance that's been put on hold. If you talk to Greg Byrne, he'll tell you the biggest priority is getting the Arizona Stadium renovated. So I think that they have a good sense of where they want to go and what needs to happen. Whether they're going to have the resources to carry it out, I think, is another thing.
And now I want to move on to another institution of higher learning here in Tucson that you cover. You reported this week that students in Pima Community College's aviation program have lost their student aid, financial aid rather, because the program isn't properly accredited. Can you explain how we got to this point?
Well, Pima had about a decade of serious mismanagement under its previous leadership, and the college is still finding out things. Now at the 11th hour, after 4 years, almost 4 years under accreditor sanction, things are still being revealed as they review their operations to try to get off sanction. And someone overlooked the fact that they needed accreditor approval to run their aviation program at Tucson International Airport. And I'm sure we're all familiar with that program. It is probably their biggest showcase of all the. They have a lot of wonderful programs there, but that's one that really, they kind of show it off when visiting dignitaries come to town. And so for it to happen there has rattled a lot of people, because you would think that in something that high profile that something like that wouldn't happen. They do seem to be taking whatever steps they can to correct things. I don't know if the communication is always the best. The students I talk to don't feel like they're being well informed, but maybe that's because the people at the top don't really know what to tell them, in detail yet. I'm not sure.
So do you think this really is a question of the sort of neglect of the previous decade still coursing through the system, or is the current administration at blame here?
I think for sure there's a lot of previous neglect that is still happening. The current administration, I guess what I would fault them for is that whether they intended to or not, they kept this whole thing from the public. And the way that they did that was by discussing things behind closed doors, not putting it in the minutes, not putting it on agendas. And so that, I think, goes to the current administration, is that they weren't open and transparent about, hey, we've got a problem, here's what we're doing to fix it. But I think the problem itself clearly stems from previous neglect.
Now, I want to move to another topic, a big story of the week. Dylan, I'll bring you in for this. The results of the special election, which after several days, finally we know the results, at least for Prop 123, is passed with a razor-sharp edge. What happens now?
Well, I guess we're going to go to court. As predicted, somebody's filing a lawsuit to challenge the entire basis of this proposition under Arizona's Enabling Act, which is the act of Congress that basically made us a state and sort of set everything up in Arizona. So we'll see how that plays out. It seems a little bit early to be filing a suit when the certification hasn't been made of the election yet. So on an official basis, we don't really know what the results are. Of course, we know that it's almost certain to pass. We're narrowly, but I think we're beyond where the pool of votes out that are still waiting to be counted. Hopefully, we will have them all counted today. There are still several thousand to go through, but there's a margin of about 17,000 votes in favor of the proposition, which is still pretty slender.
And the money won't be actually allocated to schools until the sort of legal battles are over again.
Well, that'll sort of be up to how things end up playing out in court. It may end up, with an injunction to keep things from happening. Things may move ahead. We really have to see.
Well, in addition to the fact that this is a funding mechanism, what are the political implications of that close vote?
We will really have to see who does the best job of claiming credit. Some people on the no side are, even though they didn't prevail when we were counting the votes, they got considerably more votes than you would expect if you looked at the sort of institutional weight that was behind the yes side and the enormous funding advantage that the yes campaign had. Millions of dollars compared to a few $1,000 for this many people to come out and say no. And we saw some interesting results across counties. Pima County voted more against it than for it, and several other counties, Yavapai County, Coconino County, if I remember correctly, voted against it. So will the business community and Governor Ducey be able to spin this as a victory? Will the no people be able to sort of claim some relative success and be able to talk about that and use that as a basis for making some challenges? We'll have to. There are a whole lot of things that are we'll have to see, and there will really depend on what happens with the court case or any other court cases that might be filed.
And we'll, of course, be watching. Sarah, I want to move on to a big science story of the week. You reported that the U of A's mission to an asteroid is reaching an important milestone. Can you give us a little background on Cyrus Rex and what's happening this week?
Sure. Well, Cyrus Rex is the first United States mission to return a sample from an asteroid. There's a Japanese spacecraft on its way to another asteroid. This is the first time that the U.S. has attempted this. And today, the spacecraft, which was built in Denver, at Lockheed Martin, has moved to Cape Kennedy to prepare for launch in September. So that's the first leg of its journey to space. The mission is scheduled to launch September 8th, and at that point, the University of Arizona will take over management and operation of the mission. So as it flies out to the asteroid, and it will get a gravity assist, it's going to go around the Earth one time and be flung out towards this asteroid. The spacecraft will arrive at the asteroid in 2018, and it's going to spend a couple of years just circling it, mapping it, taking pictures, characterizing it as a space rock, and then really focusing in on where they're going to go in and grab a sample. The sample will be obtained in July of 2020, and then in 2021, part of the spacecraft heads back to Earth. It lands here in 2023, and then that's when the real hard science analysis of that sample begins here, and parts of the sample will go to other institutions. But again, this mission is headquartered here. This is the second major space mission that the U of A has led, and that's pretty important for us and our economy.
That's fascinating stuff.
And in the last few minutes, I want to talk about, there are a few milestones, of course, also in journalism locally this week. Today is longtime Daily Star editor Bobbi Jo Buell's last day in the office. Carol Ann, can you give me a few thoughts on what Bobbi Jo's legacy will be for the Daily Star?
Well, one of the best things that I ever read on leadership was this: you cannot be a leader unless people are willing to follow you. And especially for, that would be difficult for anybody to get that kind of buy-in, but especially when you're overseeing a bunch of paid skeptics who are by nature not followers, journalists. And she was the kind of leader that people were willing to follow, and she led by example. She led with her heart and her head, and she never disappointed me. In 17 years that I've known her, I always felt like every decision she made, she put her heart and soul into it, and she really has been someone that we all admire and respect so much, and I'm going to miss her terribly.
Clearly someone who's really left her mark on,
Yes.
on this community. With that, we'll have to end our discussion today. That's all we have time for. Thank you again all for being here. And thank you for watching. Andrea Kelly will be back next week.